Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the warm welcome. Thank you so much. I know it's already been done, but I think it's so important that it should be done again. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on traditional territories of the first people of this land. In this case, it's the traditional territories most recently of the Mississaugas of the Credit, but also in the past of the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And that Toronto, where we're gathered today, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And while we often acknowledge the land that we're gathered on, and it's incredibly important, it's also important to reflect for a moment on the injustices that the first people of this land have faced and continue to endure. And that when we acknowledge the lands that we're gathered on, we should also come together collectively to say we will work tirelessly to end that injustice and work towards true reconciliation. And in that spirit, New Democrats and I as leader want to make it clear that we would implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I want to thank you all for being here. This is a room filled with incredible leaders that have made a mark and continue to make a mark on our country. And I want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. I'm going to start off with a line that I read recently that strikes me. Being here reminds me of this. It's something that John Lennon said. Being honest may not always get you a lot of friends, but it'll always get you the right ones. I hope by the end of this afternoon, I'll have earned some new friends. My mom always taught me growing up, she said that we're all one. And I used to find the phrase kind of hard to understand, but as I grew older, I really believed in what she said. The idea that if we see people around us that are hurting, it also hurts us. And if we help the people around us, if we lift the people around us, we all rise together. It's something that I lived myself. We launched our campaign recently in London, and it was a city where I had some of my best memories, some that I probably can't talk about, going to Western, and some of my most difficult memories. It was where I took my brother in to live with me, and I was a 20-year-old kid taking care of a kid, which was kind of complicated. But it was a time where we had a lot of help. I wouldn't have got through those tough times when we didn't have a lot of support. And I was taking care of my younger brother. I had to work a number of jobs to pay the bills. And it was a lot of friends and family, in some cases strangers, that stepped up and helped me out. And it was their help that reminded me of a very Canadian value. In Canada, we truly believe in taking care of one another. It's a very Canadian spirit. And while Canada is the envy of the world in a lot of ways, we have a beautiful country, we're very proud of this country, I believe there are so many ways where we can make it better and where we need to make it better. One of my key thrusts to you today, my key message to you today is that I believe an economy that works for everyone is better for everyone. It's truly what I believe, and I'll lay out my argument for that. In terms of my vision for Canada, what I believe we can achieve together, I think what we need as a country is a country where everyone has a place to call home, where if you need healthcare, you can access healthcare when you need it, that everyone has clean water to drink and air to breathe, and a good job and a bright future. At the very basic, that is what we need to build. Now, that also means a place where we help businesses and industries grow. And I'm going to talk about what we as New Democrats would do to help businesses grow. There are a number of ways where we can partner with businesses, but I want to acknowledge that a lot of businesses are working towards helping out their communities, giving back to not just people, but also the environment. I had a tour of just one of these many companies in Manitoba, in Winnipeg recently. There's a company called Building Urban Industries for Local Development. It's based in Winnipeg, and what they do is they help at-risk youth get training to do home retrofits and to do audits, energy audits of homes, and it puts a lot of kids to work, gets them a good, stable job, and it also, this company is doing its part to help reduce emissions. Now, we have an opportunity to work with businesses, and I'm going to lay out some of the way that we can do that. We will work together with one of the major crises that we're faced with, which is the climate crisis. And we can work together to ensure that we fight that climate crisis and create at least 300,000 new jobs that are sustainable and of quality. That's our plan to help tackle and build a cleaner economy. We want to retrofit homes, invest in building homes that have lower carbon footprints, retrofitting old commercial buildings as well as homes, but also investing in public infrastructure to electrify our transportation. We also want to help out with small businesses by fighting back against the high merchant fees that are charged so that small businesses can thrive. I know this is kind of tough because you got MasterCard sitting right over there. My bad. But that's what we believe in. But we'll work together. There's other ways we can work together. We believe in fair trade. And fair trade is not free trade, which benefits the people at the very top, but fair trade is one which helps Canadian businesses compete in the world. That means fair trade where workers that are some of the best in the world, Canadian workers, have a fair chance to compete with any jurisdiction in this world. Our workers can compete, but if they don't have the same labor laws in place, the same environmental protections in place, then Canadian businesses can't compete with low-wage markets that don't protect their workers. So we will ensure that trade deals protect jobs in Canada and Canadian manufacturing businesses. We'll also address the shortage of workers. We know this is a massive concern across rural parts of Canada. In Quebec, it's a massive concern. There is a 120,000 person gap in the workplace for jobs. Donc, on va travailler très fort avec le gouvernement Québec pour s'assurer qu'on a un système d'immigration qui accueille des gens pour régler ce problème de pénurie de main-d'œuvre. We will support our manufacturing sectors here in Canada, and that means supporting steel and auto and our high-tech sectors. To do that, we've got a number of key measures, 4 measures that we are looking at to address how we can support those industries that drive our economy. We want to have targeted supports for industries that need the supports and make sure we've got a policy in place to help those industries out. We believe in developing a robust strategy that allows workers to be innovative and competitive on a global scale. We want Canada to be we want to champion Canada on the world stage. And finally, when it comes to manufacturing, when we look at our procurement process right now, we've got to make some serious changes. Most recently, I visited Thunder Bay and I met with workers who are struggling with the fear of losing their jobs. And we've met people across this country that are threatened by job losses. And we look at some of the policies that are being implemented, and one of them is in procurement. We own Via Rail. It's a Crown corporation owned by Canadians. And when a contract went out to buy $1 billion worth of trains, the contract was awarded to Siemens, a German company, while we have some of the best trains built here in Canada. So what we're calling for is this: if we're using our public dollars, our own taxpayer dollars, if they're going towards procurement, there must be a Made in Canada requirement for procurement. We believe that economies thrive when there is respect for workers and collective bargaining. There's no question about it. And we believe that an economy is strong when the middle class is strong. And the best ticket to getting into the middle class is a union job. So we need to support that. Now, unions fought for a lot of the things that we now enjoy. They fought hard for pensions and health benefits and workplace training and skills development. I believe that these things weren't just good for workers, they're good for everyone. When people are doing well, we are all doing well. And here's one of the problems. In our country, there's far too many people that work a full-time job that cannot make ends meet. And so that's why we've got to do something about it. We can't allow that to continue where someone is working a full-time job and continuing to live in poverty. So immediately, we'll boost the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour, and then but we're not going to stop there. Then we're going to move within our 4-year mandate as government to a living wage so that people can actually thrive, not just get by. So while we're prepared to work with building a better economy, while we're prepared to work with businesses and we understand the importance of working with business, make no mistake, with the new Democrat in government, business will not be as usual. And I'm going to lay out our plan. Nous vivons dans un pays où les plus riches continuent d'être de plus en plus riches, où un pays où la majorité de la population continue de ne pas avoir les mêmes avantages. Un pays où les gouvernements conservateurs et libéraux précédents ont laissé tomber, ont laissé installer un système qui profite aux riches et qui laisse tomber le reste entre nous. Now, at one time, the idea of a social safety net, of health care that was universal, pensions, employment insurance, they all seem like pretty radical ideas. Now we realize they're very normal and we accept them. At the time when they were first being fought for and trying to be brought in, they were the powerful interests at the top that fought tooth and nail against them. It was good, hardworking people, Canadians, Tommy Douglas, many others that worked together to bring in these things that now form a massive part of who we are and our identity. The Canadian dream is one where we believe you can work hard and take care of one another and we can all get ahead. Now, I truly believe this, and I started off by saying this, that if we work to build an economy where everyone does well, everyone does well. And the problem is, right now, if you look around and you meet with people, that's not how things are going. More and more people are struggling to make ends meet. We've seen report after report that says half of Canadians, that means 1 in every 2 person you meet, is just $200 away from not being able to pay their bills. It's a pretty staggering figure when you think about it. I've met with those families. I've met with young people who, instead of being hopeful for the future, are worried and afraid. I've met with families who are being crushed under the weight of bills that keep on rising and wages that keep on staying the same. And really, the problem is, we know the economy is doing well, but it's not doing well for everyone. The massive problem is this: there is wealth, there is prosperity, but it's not being shared by everyone. The people at the top continue to do well, but life gets more and more difficult for everyone else. I think about employment and employment numbers that continue to rise, but when we look at the type of employment, it's part-time and precarious. And one of the massive concerns, one of the biggest concerns that I hear about is housing. In a country as wealthy as ours, there are far too many people that cannot afford to find a place to live. They cannot find a place to call home. And we know that bills continue to rise, and we're paying some of the most expensive bills when it comes to cell phone and internet services. We know that childcare is incredibly expensive, particularly in cities like Toronto. And while the government, maybe Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, might like to say that the economy is doing really well, I ask the question, who is it doing well for? And we think about this economy that's not doing well, or not doing well for everyone, and the fear that people feel, and the fact that families are struggling. The people that are feeling it the most are our young people. This is the first time ever that young people are looking towards a future where they have less opportunities, not more, than the previous generations. They're worried because they're being crushed under student debt. I think about my own story a little bit. When I was going through a tough time and our family was falling into financial disaster, I was able to go to law school. And at the time when I went to law school tuition fees, shout outs to the Law Society, were $8,000 a year. Now that same law school is getting close to $30,000 a year. Now I can't imagine how a young person who's struggling would ever imagine spending $30,000 a year just for tuition. It's becoming harder and harder for students. And on top of that, we look at the choices that governments are making. On one hand, students who take out federal loans are being charged interest on those loans. The government's essentially profiting off of them. Over the past 4 years, because of the prime plus about 3% that's being charged to students who have federal loans, it amounted to about $3 billion that the Liberal government picked the pockets of students who are struggling under the weight of that debt. At the same time, in the past year, Mr. Trudeau waived a $6 billion corporate loan, or corporate loans to the amount of $6 billion. To me, that is a clear example of a choice that benefited the very powerful and hurt students who are crushed under that weight, under that debt. Students and young people are also the ones that are most feeling the weight of climate anxiety. And I call it climate anxiety because the crush and the looming climate crisis means that young people are afraid of the future. I've met young families that want to have their family grow, but are afraid, not because of the bills in this case, they're worried about what the planet's going to look like when their kids grow up. And now, I don't think everyone has to decide to grow their family, but you certainly shouldn't decide not to because you're afraid of what's going to happen to the planet. So we owe it to young people to turn this around. With young people who are worried with their student debt, they're worried about not being able to afford a home, they're worried about not being able to start a family, we owe it to these young people to change things and to turn things around. I put it to you that the raw pursuit of profit that some companies sometimes use as an excuse to eliminate pensions or to eliminate benefits have further imperiled an already difficult situation. The reality is that if we're not going to change the direction that we're headed on, if we're going to continue down this path where it's more and more unaffordable for students, for young people, where we can't afford a home, you can't afford a place to live, bills continue to rise, what we're doing is essentially mortgaging the future for a generation of young people. And for me, the math just doesn't add up. If we want to build a good society, if we want to build a good economy, we have to build one that works for everyone. And I'm sure you'd agree with me. If you meet a young person, you see what you'd hope to see, optimism and excitement for the future, replaced with despair and fear and worry, it motivates you to want to do something about it. And I look at the eyes of young people and I say to them, you deserve better. And I'm committed to delivering that. It's not just a political failure if we don't act, it would be a moral failure. We can do a lot better. Now, here's a part where you're probably not going to be surprised, but I believe what we need to do is ask the very wealthy to pay a little more. There's no question about it. There's a three-letter word, a very dangerous three-letter word that I'm going to redefine for you. People are going to talk about the problem around taxes or tax. I say to you that a tax is really just a contribution. It's an investment. And if you want to invest in and contribute to this beautiful country, it means that those who are able to contribute a bit more, i.e. pay more taxes, should do so. So I'm not going to mince words. Under a new democratic government, the wealthiest and powerful corporations will be paying more. And the problem is that decisions have been made that have made it easier and easier for those at the very top, the very powerful, not to contribute their fair share. And it has a cost. People pay the price. When we don't contribute to society, i.e. pay taxes, when we don't contribute, it means that we don't have the roads and bridges we need. It means we can't invest in education. It means we can't invest in expanding our healthcare system. It means it hurts people. And what happens as a result is inequality grows. And I put to you, when you have massive inequality, it's not good for anyone. When you've got those at the very top with massive wealth and people at the bottom with nothing and who are desperate, that is not a good equation for a good society. I believe that everyone benefits when everyone shares in prosperity. Everyone benefits when everyone can realize their dreams. And that's why I believe that everyone should be contributing their fair share. And I want to just touch on the problem itself. You know, the federal government reported over the last year that there was leakage, essentially not recovering $10 billion a year from corporate tax rates. That in the past yearly basis, the Parliamentary Budget Office says that we're losing $25 billion to offshore tax havens. That businesses are actively trying as hard as they can to avoid paying their fair share. I mean, a leakage of $10 billion, offshore tax havens of $25 billion. These are massive investments that could have been made into building a better future. So those young people can look up with hope and excitement instead of fear and worry. We all know that if we have the revenue, we can build a better country. If we can increase our investments, increase our contributions, yes, increase taxes, on those who are able to, we can invest in the things that we know we need. Now, I was kind of inspired today by Rutger Bregman. I don't know if you remember Rutger Bregman. He spoke at Davos earlier this year, and he told an audience of billionaires the following: I hear people talking the language of equality and transparency, but almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance and of the rich just not paying their fair share. It feels like I'm at a firefighter conference and no one's allowed to speak about water. He's got a point. There's massive inequality in our country. Take this statistics, for example. In 2015-2016, Statistics Canada points out that Canadians paid $145 billion in taxes, while corporations paid $41 billion. The tax burden has shifted massively from businesses onto the shoulders of Canadians. We believe middle and low-income Canadians are paying their fair share. They're doing exactly what they can, and we will not raise taxes on everyday people. But we will certainly ask those who are able to contribute more. Here's another thing that to me is a massive policy failure. According to a 2017 Oxfam report, 2 Canadian men own as much as the bottom 11 million Canadians. That's 30% of our population. There is no way anyone can justify to me why it makes sense for 2 people to own the wealth that's proportional to 30% of our population. That is just makes no sense at all. So over these past 4 years with Mr. Trudeau in government, the wealthiest have enjoyed more and more wealth, while everyone else has continued to struggle to pay their bills. We've seen in 4 years that the total amount that wealthy Canadians have stashed in offshore tax havens have expanded to an astonishing $353 billion. Imagine what we could do with those revenues. We know that we have to change this. There's no way we can continue down this path where the powerful continue to not pay their fair share. We owe it to the future generations. We owe it to our kids. So that's why we're putting forward our New Deal for People. Our New Deal for People, when we get at these missed opportunities for revenue, when we ask the very wealthy to contribute more, pay more taxes, we are going to expand our healthcare system to cover people from head to toe. If you need medication, if you need medication in our country, you should use your health card, not your credit card. We are going to take immediately, on day 1 of being in government, we're going to take the interest off of all federal student loans to help students out today. I really like the cute yay that someone said. that was pretty awesome. But we're not going to end there. We believe that there should be no barriers for students who want to pursue education. So we're going to replace loans with non-repayable grants. And yes, we want to move. Shout out to Ryerson. And yes, we want to move to career, from kindergarten to career, no barrier education. That means free tuition for everyone in our country. If you need education, you should get it. We will take urgent action on the climate crisis by ending fossil fuel subsidies, by reinvesting into clean and renewable energies. We will work honestly towards reconciliation, and that means assuring at a starting point that every Indigenous community in our country has access to clean drinking water, has access to equal funding, equitable funding for their kids, education, and quality homes. And we're going to tackle the housing crisis. We're going to build 500,000 new homes, and we're going to take on speculators and money launderers to make sure that people can have a safe place, a quality place to call home. And yes, we are going to do something that Liberals and Conservatives won't do. We are going to directly lay out a path to ask those at the very top to contribute a bit more. We're going to roll back corporate tax rates to 2010 levels, so it's going to be at 18%, while keeping small business tax at the same rate. We're going to put in place a 1% super wealth tax on those who have fortunes of over $20 million. because we believe we need to get at inequality. We'll crack down on tax evasion and offshore loopholes and make sure that everyone is contributing their fair share. With these revenues, we will build the programs we know are possible. I know some will question whether raising corporate taxes means some corporations won't invest in Canada. And while there's no question that taxes are a factor, the reality is experts say it is certainly not the only one, or even the largest factor. The OECD has said that good regulations, robust public services, and workforce skill training are all key factors to encourage investments. Our plan will help companies stay competitive while families can make ends meet. And in fact, more than that, where families can thrive. Our plan to extend drug coverage to all Canadians will not only save lives, give people dignity, improve health outcomes, it will also save businesses, on average, around $600 per employee. It'll also save families massively. It's the right thing to do. For those companies who want a fair, more sustainable, and more progressive and more prosperous Canada, New Democrats are ready to work together to make this happen. Because for us, a Canada that's more equal, that's more prosperous for all, it's a fair place for all, is a better place to live for all of us. We are going to run a campaign built on this value that if we lift each other up, we all rise together. We're going to bring this hopeful message to Canadians because I believe it is time to change the direction of our country. We know we can do this, and together we'll make it happen. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. So, can you hear me? We did get some questions, so
Ready for it.
live. How will your government end the national shame that is the living conditions for Indigenous peoples on and off reserves?
Thank you very much for that question. It's incredibly important. Having visited some Indigenous communities, I've been to Grassy Narrows and met with the leadership and the young people. I went to the school and met with people that are really, young people that are really hopeful despite how challenging their situations are. And at the end of the day, First Nations and Indigenous people have the solutions. They know how to solve the problems that they're faced with. They know how to tackle those problems. They just need a partner that's willing to work with them on a respectful, dignified way. I mean, I can't imagine in a country as wealthy as ours, we're in 2019, with all the technology that we have, with all the wealth that we have, how there's any excuse for not ensuring that everyone has clean drinking water, that everyone has access to quality homes. It's unimaginable. If something is a priority, we've seen the government work immediately. Just last year, when they chose to buy a pipeline, they found $4.5 billion to buy it. I believe that we should have different priorities. Ours is to make sure that everyone has clean drinking water, that every Indigenous community has quality homes, and we will get it done.
You just described in your platform new taxes for wealthy Canadians. Some will say that wealthy Canadians will leave Canada and find ways, and they have the means to find ways to avoid paying those taxes. What do you say to that?
I say that Canada is an incredible place to live. There's many reasons why people live in Canada. And I touched on this. It's not only because of the taxation system. People want a stable government, want a safe place to live, a place where you can walk down the street, where you have access to health care. And these things are all threatened with massive inequality. So if we walk down the path that we're currently on and inequality grows further and further, it becomes worse for everyone. And no one benefits from that. I really believe that if we make the right investments, we build the right climate that encourages benefits for all, that you have head-to-toe healthcare coverage, where you know that if you live in Canada, your dental care is covered, your medication coverage is covered, If you have all these coverages and if you have the stable government that we have, it is a place where people will want to live, where business will want to grow and thrive, and I'm confident. We've seen it around the world that countries that have better services don't lose investments, they can gain and grow investments. We can do that here as well.
Keeping on healthcare, you've outlined a comprehensive healthcare platform. Those are provincial jurisdiction. How do you plan to work with the provinces to get that done?
So I'll take one example, specifically the medication coverage for all, the pharmacare example. So right now, every provincial government has actually a form of pharmacare. If you go to the hospital, your medication is covered. So every province is negotiating a deal with medication company or pharmaceutical companies to buy medication. What we're proposing is this. We would front about $9 to $10 billion required and go to each premier and say, for the same amount that you're already spending, you're currently spending on medication that covers patients in hospitals. For that same amount, we can cover every single person in your country. I can't imagine even the most conservative premier that would say no to covering everyone in their country. What we are essentially doing, sure, if you want. What we're essentially doing is this. We're saying, let us pool the buying power of 37 million Canadians. We already have the mechanisms in place. The federal government also buys medication for veterans and for Indigenous communities and for some other marginalized communities as well. We already have the mechanisms in place. Instead of having separate buying between provinces and pharmaceutical companies and the federal government and other insurance providers, let's pool our resources and buy collectively, negotiate better deals, and we'll deliver better care.
Last one. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about your party and your policies, and what do Canadians who have never voted NDP before need to know about you?
We're in it for people. I mean, that's our major focus. The big difference is this, and we've seen that, you know, if you're very powerful and very wealthy, you've had two parties that work for you. I believe we build a better economy when governments make decisions that benefit people, because everyone will benefit from that. It'll create a better climate for business, a better climate for industry, a better climate so that people have the wealth shared so they can contribute back into a better society. If you have not the means to be able to live in a home, you don't have the means to be able to purchase things, it's going to create a weaker economy. I really believe if we build an economy where everyone shares in the prosperity, we all benefit. That's what New Democrats are all about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. Thank you all.
Mr. Singh, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, thank you for kick-starting our 123rd season with your passion and commitment for the well-being of all Canadians. What a great way to open our new season. Your personal story is inspiring to so many Canadians, regardless of political stripe. I was really proud last night watching the debate at the highest levels of federal government to see the diversity on that stage. It's really inspiring. You're no stranger to adversity, but you've managed to channel that into actively pursuing your dreams and helping your family and now all Canadians. As the federal election campaign progresses, we wish you and your party all of the best. Before we close, I'd like to thank mediaevents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. Thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great afternoon.